Hello, my name is John Rose, and in this video I'd like to take a closer look at two more ways we use the wrong approach. Now, my last video I took a closer look at two ways we use the wrong approach and briefly mentioned a third way. Well, I'm going to take a look at two more ways and go back and briefly mention that third way one more time. In the last video we talked about piece 8.1. We use the wrong approach when we expect systems to solve problems that only we can solve. Piece 8.5 is when our so-called experts in medicine look at our problems individually instead of collectively. In other words, they don't study the concept of totality. In this video, we're going to take a look at piece 8.2 and 8.4, and we'll come back to piece 8.3 one more time. Piece 8.2 is one of my most exciting epiphanies I've ever had. And it may be one of my most profound epiphanies. And it's a little confusing for many people, but it's not that hard to explain. It may sound complicated, but it's really very profound and very simple, as all profound things are. They are simple. And piece 8.2 is when we use the wrong approach, when we go looking for logical fallacies in systems with invalid structures. Yeah, that really sounds complicated, doesn't it? But all you have to understand to figure that out is to understand what we do with logic. You see, there are two criteria that must be met when we use logic. There are two requirements that we must have in order to use logic. There are two tests that we must pass in order to use logic. One is very simple, one is very complex. One is the structure, one is the specifics. So what we do is we don't look for logical fallacies in systems with an invalid structure. Two tests. There's two tests we got to give people. Give them the simple test first. Don't go giving them this test until you're giving them this test. Because if they fail this test, we don't have to give them this test. This is how we get tricked. Life is very complicated when we take the first step heading east and go looking for a sunset. We'll never find it that way. And that's what we're doing. We get lost in the details. And we don't want to do that. If you try to find logical fallacies in something as complicated as conventional medicine, it takes a lot of knowledge and intellect to be able to do that. And my point is, we don't want to waste our time doing that because it already fails the other test. It fails the structure test. And that's piece 8.4. And that's where our so-called experts are putting the cart before the horse for a problem within our control. In Latin, this is called modus ponens. So if you're going to use logic, this is the logical fallacy they use. And therefore, they fail the test. Throw conventional medicine out the window. Why? Because they failed the test. They're treating symptoms for problems that are lifestyle related. You see, logic is very simple. There's two tests. One is the specifics. It's like a railroad track. And then we have a train on top of the track. That's the contents. That's the details. That's the specifics. That's where we go looking for the logical fallacies. But wait a second. The structure, the tracks are always one way. So we can tell if it's going the right way or the wrong way. And that's what happens when you put the cart before the horse. That's what you do when you treat a symptom for a problem within your control. You don't treat a symptom for a problem within your control. Our problems are in the third stage of knowledge. We go back to the second stage and look at what we're doing and change it. And we're not doing that. So piece 8.4 is when our so-called experts put the cart before the horse. They're guilty of modus ponens. And they fail the most important test, the structure test. That's why I perfected this special teaching tool, or created this tool rather, is so that I can prove the structure is invalid. Don't waste your time trying to prove vaccines work or not. We already know they fail the structure. That's not what it's all about. Those problems are within our control. So those are four pieces, and then the third piece was 8.3. That's again when our so-called experts study the anatomy and chemistry and pharmakeia and other things that are related to the symptom instead of the lifestyle factors that create most of our problems. Now, we need those type of experts that study the anatomy and chemistry and pharmakeia for problems outside of control, like the accidents and acts of nature and acts of crime, violence, and war and things like that, right? That's what they're for. But they're not qualified for all the other problems because they're within our control. So they use the wrong approach by being taught that most of our diseases are due to inappropriate signals. Don't blame the fries, blame biology. Even something minor like acne is a medical condition. This is the kind of garbage that they teach our so-called experts, and they have no clue that they're using the wrong approach. We're using the wrong approach, piece 8.1, when we expect systems to solve our problems. We use the wrong approach, 8.2, when we try to find a logical fallacy in a system when it already has an invalid structure. That's the great thing about solving our problems, because just about every system that's in charge is guilty of monist ponens, because most of our problems are within our control. And there are no downstream solutions for those problems, and yet that's where most of our attention is focused. And yes, we have to work downstream if the problem's outside of control, or if we remove the primary causes by going upstream, but the subsequent causes still exist. I explain that over and over in my videos about how we have damaged ourselves and society and the environment. Now we have another group of needs we must satisfy. This is how it can get complicated if the body is damaged. And then we do have to work downstream. And there are all sorts of different protocols we can use for that. Got me those mosquito hots out here tickling me again. They land on you and they're really quite distracting. But anyway, we have to take charge. We have to take responsibility. We have to realize that the people who have a monopoly on a system that shouldn't exist don't have any solutions. They don't know what the cause is, and we have to wake up and stop accepting their explanations. We have to realize that healthcare is self-care, and it begins by looking at our lifestyle choices and making better choices. The problem that most of us have is we really don't have the knowledge of how to eat. And because this is such a hard subject for most of us to even entertain, the best thing for us to do is to test an idea as time has come. Correct 5 main mistakes on a temporary basis, whether you believe they're a mistake or not, just to show you the difference. And then after you do it, then you can be in a better position to evaluate whether or not you want to go back to those mistakes. And if you go long enough the first time, you'll reset your feedback system, and then it'll be more obvious that certain foods are right or wrong. And as it is right now, most of us are not in a position. We have a malfunctioning survival mechanism. We can't trust our feedback system. We build up a tolerance to it. So we have to overcome that tolerance. And how do we do it? We take a solid food vacation. You can check out the description box down below. I have a playlist for the solid food vacation. And as you know, my friends, when you guys do this, you're in for a treat.